All right, that brings us, I think we're done with the superintendent's report.
I think so.
Okay, so that brings us to questions and comments regarding tonight's agenda only. And it looks like we have 3 loyal followers through the entire meeting, or 4, it looks like. So any of the 4 have a question about tonight's agenda, and then of course we'll open it up to questions at the end. If you have questions about anything. Bill, does anybody
No
have a
hands
hand raised
raised.
for now?
No hands raised yet.
Okay,
Nope.
all right. Janine, I think I do the minutes.
Wait, there's one. Sorry.
Oh.
McGill, hold on. That's the unmute.
Hi, sorry. Yep, there's always one.
Hello, Heather.
How are you, Heather?
Good, good. I just have a couple questions on the presentations you guys just made.
Mhm.
On the pandemic effects on the academic performance stats. Has administration reached out to the teachers on how you think these statistics are going to look after the second quarter? Obviously the first quarter is very transitionary. The teachers gave a lot of leeway, moving back into schooling. I think the second quarter is becoming a little more mundane for the kids. The reality of the hybrid learning situation is setting in. The reality of no music and sports or clubs. I think the kids are really actually feeling the effects more in the second quarter than the first quarter. I have 2 kids who love school. They're, becoming increasingly disengaged with school, one concerningly so, which is, hard to watch. So do you guys have any idea what you think that might look like, at the close of the second quarter?
We did our initial analysis. The principals are obviously very much engaged. The building level administration, more so than I am. To be honest, so I would need to bring the principals, I think, into that conversation, and dig a little bit more, deeper into that. But clearly, we're going to be following up. We're utilizing this to try to adjust what we're doing and what our response is. We're just, again, trying to make the data work for us, Heather, if you will.
Sure. Now, when was the last look back, and what shifts were made at the secondary complex as a result of the last look back?
Actually, you know what? I'm trying to see what my notes are. The last look back was 12/7, I think. And I think I have my notes right here. Yeah. So 12/7, the last look back at the middle school, high school. On January 4th, we're going to be bringing kids back for extra help. By their cohort, like they can stay after school now. But we will not be able to provide transportation for that. That's one caveat to that. So kids can, though, come to extra help if they can get a ride. Then we talked about a couple of things impacting the white cohort, like changing a particular day. Like, so for instance, the 23rd, we switched, and that went out information to try to get some equity, because otherwise it would have been too many red cohort days in a row. So the 23rd was switched to a white cohort. We talked about the sports in January, but then subsequent to that, we did get word that the high risk sports were going to be canceled. So we were talking about the use of inside facilities, and with the cancellation of that, we're kind of holding firm on the, not using the inside facilities with outside groups. But we were talking we were talking about doing some thought about trying to do something for the seniors, and we're not really in a position where we have a solid plan yet, but trying to bring back all our seniors potentially, as opposed to just having half of them in. But we don't see, the problem is we don't have the space to do what some districts are doing. Our space is utilized at some of our classrooms are utilized 9 periods a day. So our space is essentially at 85% capacity, probably at 95% to 100% capacity. So what we need to be able to do is if we brought back our seniors, we would have to have alternative space for half the kids to learn virtually at some point and like kind of rotate that through so that we could continue to socially distance. So we're talking about some creative ways to try to get that done.
So it actually kind of plays into, it almost jumps me forward to kind of my last question, but I'm still going to go back on something else.
Mhm.
So I know when this all began, nobody really wanted to touch the master schedule. You always wanted to be able to transition back to fully in person if the circumstances allowed, have a lot of flexibility. So now we're well into the second quarter. The numbers are not getting better. Have you guys considered a shift to split sessions at the middle school and high school that would allow you to bring back more students into the building if you don't have the entire secondary complex there all at the same time?
I'm not sure that a split session model would work. I mean, it'd be probably pretty much, very much so cost prohibitive to do something like that. So I don't know that that would be a viable option given our, budget constraints.
Okay, I just something I would ask that you guys look into. Like I said, maybe busing might be an issue because you'd have to run, 2 buses to start the day, 2 buses to end the day. But if you could spread them out and use the space like other districts do, I want nothing more. I don't have a senior. I want nothing more than the
Yeah.
seniors to be there full time. I will tell you though, as a parent of the only junior in the AP chemistry class, in a class of 8 kids, if 7 of them are going to be there 5 days a week, and I have one junior who is now the sole remote learner 2 or 3 days, that would be very concerning for me as a parent. And that, again, I want nothing more than those seniors to be back. I think it's very important, but I think it would be very, very difficult, for my junior who's already struggling in this setting to be the only kid who's not in that classroom 5 days a week.
Understood. Yep. Yeah, I
So
think that's the problem with trying to bring back everyone is that there's just not enough alternative spaces when we're really working at 95% capacity, like, with all those classrooms running almost every period. Like some schools have the luxury of having that space where teachers have dedicated classes. Our teachers move and share spaces. And so it's difficult to be able to provide an alternative space for the virtual kids to be like some districts are able to do.
Okay. And just the only other, thought, and I know you guys all know this, obviously the use of multiple failures or measuring the extremes, and those numbers were concerning in of themselves, but the probably a more concerning number are the kids who are struggling, but not to the extremes of failures, but it's definitely affecting their educational growth. I think if there was a way to easily measure that, which there's not, I think that number would have all of us really horrified, more than just measuring the extremes of multiple failures at the secondary complex. So I think that the situation is actually probably much more dire than the statistics showed tonight.
Well,
So it's,
yeah, I don't disagree with you, Heather. I think we're trying to find things that we can, like you said, we can quantify, but qualitatively speaking, we do have anecdotals that we speak to, and I think some of that goes into our child study, and some of those kids that potentially come into our child study team that otherwise we would have probably never heard from, and they're not necessarily failures, but they're kids who are struggling in so many ways.
right.
I don't think
And you had just mentioned, obviously, the state has put the brakes on the high risk sports for the winter. We had received an email today that the school's still planning if the stats allow for the low risk winter sports, but there's been no explanation as to how that would be carried out. And that's supposed to start January 4th. Is that going to be broken up by cohort for practices, meets, things like
Right.
that?
So Section 11 did put out sort of like a return to play playbook, but I think given the new guidance now, that needs to be revisited again. So it's and they're on complete hold. Like first they canceled, and then they said, well, it's postponed, because I think they're really waiting to hear from what the governor's office is going to say they're permitted to do. And then, unfortunately, it comes from different layers. Robert Zayas up at New York State Public High School Athletic Association, put some guidance out, and then the locals, Section 11, will put some guidance out, and then it'll be up to put it in place. And like you said, it's coming quickly. So we do need to figure out what that looks like. We don't have, so when we talk about a moderate to low risk sport, we're talking about like winter track.
Right,
Now,
that's all we have for the winter. So
Right.
what would winter track look like? for
So with the
center
track
marchers?
is interesting because they don't have Brentwood. Brentwood is not allowing anybody to run meets there. So the only way you could run a meet is if there's a district that can host it in some way. And what does that look like? So there's just so many logistical things to consider with this that I'm not sure, because, I think that there's a way that we could allow our kids to, I don't know, run the holes or something, and do it safely if we keep it in one direction or what have you, to train, but we have to figure that out. And I'm really not sure what that looks like until we get a little bit more guidance on that.
Okay, and so then just quickly, you had mentioned that, obviously with the elimination of the high risk sports, you made the determination to keep outside organizations from using the inside spaces at the high school. Would that be the same for the high school sports? Or would those kids be allowed to use inside spaces for practice purposes?
Okay, so that's, one of the things that we really liked that we were able to get going was like kind of the off-season workouts outside, and we did like them in mass, and we're at least trying to offer something. I'd love to create a way to do that, and if we could put together a good plan, I would be fully supportive of that. And I don't want to speak for the board, but I think the board would 100% love to see us being able to do things, to support the physical and emotional well-being of kids.
And so that could possibly include, using inside spaces at the high school,
Yeah.
if broken up and, compliant with the guidelines.
Correct.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. I've exceeded my 3 minutes, so I'm good. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather.
I think George.
Is George muted?
No, let's see. Hold on.
Just keep him like that. It's fine. I'm trying to unmute you, George. I'm a host and I can't unmute you.
There he goes.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say, Heather, anything that we can do to provide our children with any opportunity is something we're going to look at. So, we appreciate your patience and the questions. They're always good ones, and the conversations. And these conversations are happening all the time amongst us, and we want to do what's best for everybody. So thank you. Bill, do we have?
No more hands.
Okay. All right, then we'll have an opportunity at the end for questions about anything. So Janine, I think I do the minutes and then you'll do the rest, or you want me to do the whole thing tonight?
You want to do minutes, financial reports, and then I'll jump down consent agenda?
Okay. The Board of Education is asked to accept the minutes of the following meetings as prepared by the district clerk. Minutes of the meetings of the Board of Education on November 18th, 2020. Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Financial reports. Be it resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, accepts the following financial reports: budget transfers, one page, Exhibit 2, an internal claims audit report, November 2020, Exhibit 2A, Treasurer Report 2020, Exhibit 2B, and Student Activity Report 2020, Exhibit 2C. Motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously.
Consent agenda vote. Be it resolved, the motion to approve the consent agenda, asterisk agenda items are consent agenda items. Consent agenda items are approved via a single vote unless they are removed from being a consent item prior to the vote. Motion?
Motion.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. So that brings us, I think, if I got this right, I have the agenda on my phone and my arms aren't long enough for me to read it. Discussion item?
It's the,
board member configuration, is that what, right?
yeah, there was just the one item, there was some conversation, last year, I believe, Marcus had discussed the idea of the makeup of the board, and some question was to, why is 5 our number? And essentially in the regulations, the board can be, if you're a common school district, actually, you can be a 1-person board. And there are certain rules that go along with that, but otherwise it has to be 3, 5, 7, 9. And so our district is made up of a 5-member board. Did a little digging and research on that. I spent some time trying to, determine, well, what would we need to do if there was to be any kind of a change? So I researched a little bit and found that essentially what would have to happen is we would have to have 5% of our previous year's voting population would have to petition to have a change to the number of board seats in Center Merchants. That would amount to about 200 people, or 100 would have to sign off on a petition to request a change. And if that position came to the board, then it would have to go to a referendum, which we would put on our ballot, and then the community could vote to see if they wanted to add board seats. So sort of like packing the court, I guess. If we wanted to pack the court, to maybe take a little power away from George or something, we could do that. But so it would have to be odd. We would have to, put that to the community would have to vote to make it. I think, if we were really, to look at it, to me, we're a district of, 1,500 kids and, almost 400 staff. And a community our size, to me, the 5 seems like about the right number. Larger communities tend to have larger boards. Smaller communities sometimes have less, but 5 is typically a manageable number for a small to medium-sized district. And then sometimes you have larger districts that tend to have more. I think that one point I would point out is that, a couple of years ago, and my only 2 experiences was 2 years ago, there was an uncontested race. And then last year there was, 3 for 2. Sometimes getting in a small community, getting 7 people, I know the pay is good, and the aggravation's so small, that it seems so appealing to be a board member, but sometimes it's difficult to fill those seats. And I know I believe I spoke to one colleague who had a 7-member board that they were trying to reduce it because, every year they were having difficulty in a similar sized district. It's actually Port Jeff. They were having a difficult time finding 7 people that would be willing to sit on the board. So just putting that out, that's information that I had. We could do, if you wanted, I could go on a data search and try to figure out districts under 1,000, between 1,000 and 2,000, and then 2,000 plus, how many are made up of, 3, 5, 7, 9 members, and put together data on that. I don't have that now. It would take a bit of time to put that together, but I could.
Marcus?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you looked into it a little bit, Ron. I did not realize that it kind of works the other way, that the petition comes first and then the board kind of acts on it. And I'm sure that if we felt strongly about it as a board, we could nominate somebody to generate a petition and probably get community signatures. But that's neither here nor there. I think the value of the discussion is really to find out what is the right size for our community. And I did not do a survey, so I can't give you numbers, but I have looked. There are, a number of smaller sized districts that do have boards of 7 members. So it does go both directions. And I think for me, some of the reasons that it might be a good fit for Center Ridge is to go to 7. The level of oversight and responsibility that the board has doesn't really directly scale with students, right? I mean, we don't work at the individual student level and the things that we're responsible for. And so there is, aside from the poor pay and aggravation, there is really a lot of work that gets spread out among the board members. And so, if you spread it out among 7, that does help a little bit in terms of, being on committees, looking at delegating individual things to board members. And then also we have had in this board in recent years, we've had some board members step down unexpectedly. So now your board drops down to 4. A few years ago, we actually had another board member recuse themselves during that time period. So now the board is down to 3 for a short period. These things, and if you think back last year, we had a situation, some of the discussions were among fewer board members, right? So these things are not as rare as you think.
Wait, Marcus, when was the board 3? I don't remember that.
I think actually when you were on the board, Robin, it was right before an election. We had a board member step down before they could be added to the ballot, before their seat could get added to the ballot.
Yeah, but we had 4 then, I think.
We did have 4, but if I recall correctly, one of the board members.
Was that Gary Younger?
No, it wasn't Gary. I think it was
Kristen Turner.
Frank.
I think it was, I
And
think
then-
one member stepped down and there was a 4-member board. And
Yeah, 4. Yeah, there was, no, I don't remember 3.
I think one seat was up for election. And that seat did turn over. But it never went down to 3 because
No.
somebody was appointed. That was the year prior to me getting on the board because somebody was
Yes.
appointed to the board and I actually started a month earlier because I needed to complete that term based on the vote.
Correct.
So I understand what you're saying, Marcus, but the board, I don't think ever was at a 3-member board.
No, it wasn't
No.
a 3-member board, but the discussions, the work of the board, at least on some particular topic, was down to 3 because one member recused themselves.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So one
Right.
member decided not to participate in something that
Right.
was happening.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I misunderstood you. I thought you meant there was only 3
That's
people.
right. Yeah.
Never 3 members, no.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we can go back and forth and decide, what's a better number when you have deliberations, when you have group dynamics and discussions like that. Is it better to have more people, fewer people? Obviously, I'll admit that it's more of a headache to communicate, outside meetings when an issue comes up. You are a non-phone person and you make lots of phone calls, and that's a hassle. If you have to do it with another 2 members, definitely that's a downside to it as well.
Look, Marcus, that's the nature of
Yeah.
being on the Board of Ed, right? And
Yeah.
I know we joke about poor pay but there is so much of this that is rewarding. Otherwise we would not stay on the board. That being said, my biggest concern is the larger you get, the more difficult it is to make decisions and move forward. And, is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't know. But the other part of it would be, I'd be very concerned that we'd have the people to fill the seats. That would be my biggest concern based on the way things have gone historically, right? We had 2 seats available last year and it was 2 sitting board members and a board member who stepped away for a year that ran for it. It wasn't, we're not seeing, the number of community members. If we had 2 seats available last year, we had 5 people run and 2 people outside of current or former board members express interest in running. I think I'd be more open to moving to a 7-person board. And maybe, we have 1 seat, I think, up this year. So we'll see, what that brings. And if we have more people interested in that 1 seat, those people that haven't participated in the Board of Ed, maybe it's a deeper conversation for us to have. If that makes sense. I just, in the cycle before that was unopposed. And the cycle before that is the cycle you're talking about when somebody stepped down and it was too late to get that additional seat, 3rd seat, I think it would have been on the ballot. And I was one of the people who ran then. And it was former board members and it was myself and Danielle. And that's when Danielle got her seat. And then the next cycle, it was me and one other person. And then the next, so it's a lot of the same people as opposed to a larger spectrum. So that would be my concern.
Now, just one other comment on the numerics.
Yeah.
I think the reason that I felt a little more pressure to bring this topic up this year, if it were a 7-member board, I think the election cycle, instead of being 2 members one year, 2 members the next, and then 1 in the 3rd year, it would have to go to a 2, and a 3, which would mean this would be the year that it would change, right? I mean, you could do it in different ways. You could.
Oh, different terms, term limits?
No, that's what I'm saying. If you keep the terms as 3 years, then how do you get 7 members over 3 years, right? It's 2, 2, and 3, or you could do something more extreme, like you could do
6 and 1.
5, 1, 1 or something, right? But that's probably too misbalanced. So
You could go 4-year terms.
yeah, you could do that too. So, and that again, that's just why I brought it up at this point, because
You know, Marcus, it's a good, interesting conversation to have. I think for me, I'd like to see what happens this election cycle. See if the interest is there from a greater number of people in the community, you know, now that we're talking about it, and to see if it's even a viable option.
Yep.
You know, you don't want to go to a 7-member board and only have 6 people fill it. Because the purpose of an odd member board is so there's never a tie.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't want 6 and go 3-3. Then what do we do?
Well, you'd have to appoint somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, but if we only have 6 people run, Ron, how are you gonna find somebody? We're gonna pay him a bonus,
Somebody?
You have to,
you know?
gotta drag somebody in, make them do
Yeah.
it.
And is that what we want? Do we want somebody who's filling the seat reluctantly? You know, I don't know that I would want that either. I don't know if the community would. You know, I don't know. It would be interesting for us to talk to the people that we know and see what their feelings are as well. Right? Because we represent them. So if they want a 7-member board, then 7-member board it is. It'll be interesting. So what do you, Marcus, can we come back to this?
no, especially as Ron explained, we need to have a petition
Yeah,
signed by community members, and that's not going to happen until June, right?
right.
More than likely,
All right.
at least until the election cycle gets started. So yeah,
Mm.
all right. There's clearly no rush on this.
All right. Thank you, Marcus. Thanks, Ron, for digging into that.
Sure.
Appreciate it. So that's general public questions. If you got anything about anything. Anyone?
I'm gonna take off my district clerk hat for a second and be a public member. I've been sitting here at my kitchen table and I've watched the amber lights go back in the high school numerous times. Shouting out to the grounds crew for keeping everything all nice and clean in spite of us not having school tomorrow.
Send them my way, Janine.
That's, Raina's cracking the whip on those guys.
Yeah. Raina, you should be out there with a shovel.
Yikes.
Yeah. Bill, we have any hands?
No hands,
No hands?
no hands.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to the adjournment of public session. And we are moving back into exec. So all right. Do I adjourn and then we move into exec, or do I just move into exec?
You have to move into exec, and we adjourn when we end the meeting.
All right, so before we move into exec, I just want to thank those of you that stayed with us the entire meeting. I appreciate it. Today was a bit of a lengthier one, but that information was important for us to have and important for the community to see. So thank you very much for that. We always appreciate the participation of the members of our community. So thank you. Board of Ed, moving to executive session to discuss other matters, the disclosure of which would result in an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy. Motion,
Motion.
second,
Second.
all in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion carries unanimously. Our next scheduled Board of Ed meeting is January 13th, 2021. Hopefully we'll be in the boardroom or maybe in the auditorium or something along those lines, but if not, it'll be exec at 6, and then we'll do our best to get out at 7 o'clock for the public, because your time is as valuable as ours. So thank you very much. Have a good evening. Stay safe. Enjoy the snow day tomorrow.
Night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
George,
Night.
we'll see you maybe on Friday. There's a bunch of contracts for you to sign and I have to notarize them for you.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
You guys want to stay here? And I could just,
If you could lock the room, turn the key and lock the room.
yeah, I
I'm
can,
leaving. Good night.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Good night, Janine.
I could put some people in the waiting room.
Okay.
Okay. I think we lost Kerry.
Ron, just make sure you turn off recording.
Yeah.
Are you host right now, Ron?